guys, today we're going to quickly run over what exactly is serviced accommodation and the frequently asked questions about serviced accommodation. So firstly, we're going to start with explaining what is serviced accommodation, also known as SA for short. It's going to be a very quick basic overview. So this property strategy is all about collaboration, working as a team and relying on people to follow the systems you put in place. Otherwise, this will quickly become a job. So the easiest way to describe serviced accommodation is a bed and breakfast with no breakfast, unless you would like to cook breakfast every morning. A comparison of a serviced accommodation is a hotel using various styles of properties. You rent out your accommodation to be used just as a hotel with similar systems and processes that you put in place. This can be nearly any kind of accommodation you can think of. The more quirky and unusual the accommodation, sometimes the more interest it can gain. The property can be an apartment, house, or adapt it to any style of accommodation you can think of. So what that means is something like a glamping tent, for example. Once you are Once you are advertising your property, you can receive bookings from sites like Booking.com, Airbnb, and TripAdvisor, plus much more, of course. You can also create your own website, take direct bookings on a commission and avoid commission charges. That's a very basic overview of serviced accommodation. So now let's try to answer a few commonly asked questions. So the first one, should we have house rules? Yes, it's definitely advised to have house rules. They can be displayed in the house or emailed to your guest prior to arrival. What happens if I have a double booking? So if you have a double booking by accident, the guests are still your responsibility in terms of trying to find them somewhere to stay. You can, of course, request for a cancellation. A lot of guests will accept the cancellation and then try and find alternative accommodation. But the first thing to do would be to contact either the guest and also just let the booking site know. Should there be condiments for my guests? This really depends on the type and the feel of accommodation that you want to achieve, and also who will be staying in the accommodation. So maybe with this point you could ask for feedback from your guest. So if you do supply condiments or you don't supply them, it may be a good idea just to ask your guests after they've stayed whether they thought it was a good touch or whether they would have liked them, depending on what you're doing. So should I meet and greet guests after arriving to stay at the property? So you can meet and greet guests. This will of course take a lot of your time. So it's very dependent on your strategy. You will of course gain more reviews because the guests will obviously feel a lot more that you have tried and made more of an effort. But of course, this is a lot more effort and it can take a lot more time. And it can also cost you money because while you're doing meet and greets, and maybe if the guest turns up later than they thought they would, this obviously then costs you extra time and money. So should I have spare laundry? Yes, if possible you should have spare laundry on site for your cleaner. If not, of course, it's not the end of the world. Hopefully your cleaner should have access to it somewhere very close. Should I buy linen or rent linen? That is totally up to you. We usually rent our linen. It's just because it's a simpler process. It does cost us maybe a little bit more in terms of paying, but it saves us in time and hassle. So the linen rental that we use, they pick up the dirty linen and then will deliver fresh linen. So it's just a lot easier. Following on from that, should I have maintenance or boiler cover? So this is really dependent on your peace of mind as a person. I would say yes, if possible, or have some kind of company that you can rely on that can be called out on short notice. What fire precautions should I take? So there are some guides on this. As far as I'm aware, Airbnb have just released a new one as well. But there are guides on the government website detailing fire risks and what to do about them. If you are unsure, I would just advise to get an actual fire risk assessment done on the property, which is pretty useful because it will flag things that you probably have not thought about. So they are useful to do. We usually do carry them out before going forward with a serviced accommodation property. So next question, what happens if there's damage to my property? Of course, sometimes things get broken by accident. Sometimes people can break stuff just because it's a rental property. So it's totally up to you on how you want to kind of react to that. The best approach is to just think of it as a business and things will get broken and damaged at some point, and it's about how you kind of mitigate that risk. So back to that point, some people do take deposits, which is a good idea. What happens if the guests throw a party? So people will push their luck. Depending on the area, I tend to find this can rarely happen or it can happen quite frequently. Where this has happened in the past, we have introduced a deposit and it has reduced this a lot. So maybe think about introducing a deposit, which will hopefully deter people from damaging the property and also throwing any parties and things there, because then they are aware that it's against your house rules and they have paid a deposit, which they should be aware of. Does my property need Wi-Fi? Yes. Make sure your property has Wi-Fi for the guests to use and that it is decent Wi-Fi. So what needs to be put into the property? So this really is a question that's dependent on the guests you're accommodating. So if this is a very luxury serviced accommodation and you're trying to give a luxury feel, then obviously you're going to need more luxury items and more condiments, and also things like welcome packs, maybe wine bottles, chocolates, things like that. So more of a luxury welcome. So actually, coming on to another point from that is, should I have a welcome pack? So we usually have a welcome pack and we like to email it just to save paper and printing things and leaving things around in the apartment. We also use the welcome pack as part of the check-in kind of process. So it's all kind of merged into one. Some people can also leave, or sometimes you can also leave a welcome pack in the property. But like I just mentioned, this is usually dependent on the kind of feel that you are trying to put in the property and towards the guests. Should I call guests before arrival? So this is really dependent on whether you're going to meet and greet the guest, and also if there's some kind of upsell process before they arrive. So for example, if you have a property that may have some kind of sea view or a balcony or something that you could upgrade if you had access to different rooms. Sorry, so if you had an apartment, two apartments in the same block, for an example, one of them had a balcony and the other one never. If the one with the balcony was available, maybe you'd want to call them prior to arrival, just to try and upgrade them to that apartment with the balcony. So there are other things you could upsell, which people have done in the past prior to arrival. It's really dependent on your process and check-in and how hands-on you want to be. Obviously, making phone calls is more time, so it's really dependent on how you want to operate. Should I ask for reviews? So yes, try and ask for reviews whenever possible. Usually the booking site that they are booked with will try and ask them for a review as well. But if you can, if possible, try and get a review off them. Maybe some kind of link or form that they could fill out. And that would also be helpful in future for you. So that is the end of the FAQ. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick FAQ explaining what serviced accommodation actually is and the frequently asked questions regarding it.